Welcome back to this next chapter of The Truth about TCM. What I'd invite you to do is have a brief look at the history of modern quantum physics, and then have a look at the theory of the Tao, the way that the Tao split into the yin and yang. And from this, TCM sprang their theory of the Zhang Fu organs. Again, remember, TCM was very much organ focused, whereas we've now gone on to learn later on in the classical sense that there are only certain schools of acupuncture that focus on the Zhang Fu. The majority of the real acupuncture sort of practices that are emerging are more focused on the meridians, the Meridian Theory. We know that originally there was a concept of the Tao, this singularity, this point of singularity, a source energy, and from this split into two entities, yin and yang, which are contained in specific and certain proportions. In Egyptian philosophy, they have a similar kind of viewpoint, and from the viewpoint of something called the Kabbalah, we see that there is a mention of something called the single source and the tree of life. If we look at the letter I, we see a dot over the letter I, which is originally an Egyptian scripture, and the dot over the I comes from this single position. So we could say that Taoism was the center point of everything, and the medicine was an attempt to reintegrate the person with the whole. Generally with Western medicine, we have this question is, where do I enter the case? In other words, where do I begin from in terms of treatment? Was it the psyche? Is it the physiological? Is it the physical? Whereas the Eastern perspective traditionally was, where do I start with the Tao? And I start with the Tao. There was a school of thought developed over the last 40 years called psychoimmunology. Have a little look at this when you get a chance. It's a relatively new train of thought, and there is a section within it that talks about rationalization of illnesses. So people are rationalizing their illness. Look, we know in the West we can lift objects incorrectly. We have a poor diet plan. We drink to excess, or we eat to excess. We stay up late. This affects the biorhythms of the body. And realistically, the Chinese would go to bed in their own country on average between 9:30 and 10 p.m. They realize that anything later than this starts to damage the kidney qi, and the kidneys being the battery force of the body. A doctor's advice would be stop lifting, stop eating an excessive diet, stop sleeping late. An acupuncturist could advise the same thing, but our attempt is to actually intervene in the person's energy flow, therefore calming them down. Belief in acupuncture is a piece of information that is held within the person's belief. Some of the modern approaches of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, is that they will take a belief and they'll dismantle it. Whereas the Chinese old belief of the Tao was that if you got to the Tao and you worked with the Tao, everything around it will organize itself spontaneously. Pretty profound, really. From this, though, TCM started to compartmentalize the work into what was known as the materia medica of herbal medicine, being the number one choice, followed by acupuncture, followed by Tuina, and dietary therapy, and then Qigong. And to a lesser extent, Anmo, maybe Anmo of the feet, and more of the body from a folk medicine or day spa perspective. We have to remember from a dietary therapy, the Chinese would include foods that we wouldn't normally associate. Dogs, cats, rats. The Chinese had a strong belief in organic chicken as improving the endocrine system of the female. Chicken eggs are very good. Obviously the right quality eggs. And older men were eating dogs because it was increasing the yang qi of the kidney. And older women were eating cats because that was improving the ladies' yin qi. We know that excessive saturated artificial fats damage the liver. And we know that excessive sugar damages the spleen, pancreas, and the liver. From a Qigong perspective, we have a splitting there from the Tao, and we have these internal schools, and then we have these external schools. The internal schools emphasize more feeling and less body interaction. External schools emphasizing movement and then tuning into the internal interaction. Using in a mental and emotional state can help link into visualizations, therefore helping to change psycho-emotional health, which then feeds down to the physiological and so on and so forth. The Taoists always attempted to achieve an honorable way of exercising, moving quietly, improving breath, movement, posture. We know that in our own clinics it's hard for our patients to do these exercises on a regular basis. So again, TCM has stepped in and intervened through acupuncture. So acupuncture is becoming to be a little bit of a crutch. Sometimes in Tibetan medicine, the physician would use some form of meditation and exercise as a way of integrating the person's level of balance, and then once that had been achieved, they would intervene with some form of treatment. Typically, from a TCM perspective, it would be expected that a practitioner treats with herbals daily, acupuncture at least 3 times a week, some form of physical therapy like Tuina, additions to the diet and Qigong prescription. That would be the ultimate pinnacle within medicine. How TCM has progressed from the Tao is this splitting into yin and yang, the difference, hot and cold, cold and hot, no state to a state. And from this we've developed 3 types of medicine from this: the 8 principles, the San Jiao, and the 5 elements. But really, we've got to learn how to learn this medicine effectively. And I believe that as fantastic as TCM has become, that we've got to learn how to help people treat their own conditions also. Really examine those compartmentalizations of yin and yang. Yin being cold, for example, quiet, deficient; yang being heat, movement, and excess. And the more and more you investigate it, the more and more you realize that the two cannot exist without each other. They're reliant. So in the next chapter we will talk a little bit further, breaking this down. Thanks very much again.